Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the panel on hydrocarbons and renewable energy. The theme is adapting economies to achieve net zero. With us on the panel are Mr. Patrick Dlamini, CEO of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ajong. Good afternoon, Caroline.
And from the beautiful country of Rwanda is Mr. Serge Kamuhinda, CEO of Volkswagen Rwanda. Welcome to the panel, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
From Kenya, we'll have Dr. Izael da Silva, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at Strathmore University. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Ajong. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is same. And from Brazil, we have Mr. Constantino Jr., coordinator of the Green Hydrogen Hub in the state of Ceará. Thank you for joining us on the panel, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ajong. It's a pleasure for me, for our stage, to be here.
And joining us later in the panel with questions from the audience will be Caroline from the Brazil Africa Forum. We'll start with you, Mr. Patrick Dlamini. How can countries simultaneously address energy transition and energy poverty?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think this is a very interesting time, I must say. The net zero ambition by the world, in line with the Paris Agreement, says as the global citizens, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're able to migrate towards a cleaner future and less carbon-intensive future. So this, for the continent as an emerging economy, says we have an opportunity to start looking at how do we start revisiting our ways of doing business. I'm saying this because, South Africa is a coal-endowed nation, but coal is a fossil fuel that emits a lot of greenhouse gas emission. Now, what this says, especially on the back of the COP26 in Glasgow, it says we need to start looking at how do we make sure that our products that we export to international markets are competitive and don't attract carbon tax as it is now actually being planned. But what it says is that as the nations of the developing nations, we have to start looking at how do we begin to plan, how do we design our economies in such a way that we can be able to start migrating towards green hydrogen. But this says there's going to be massive opportunities for the people of the world, because all of a sudden we can be able to produce these hydrocarbons we can be able to produce this green hydrogen in our own countries. We won't be importing it from other nations. We can be able to create our own jobs in our own countries. But as the DFIs, we have a role to play in advising our government and in working with our government and putting the risk capital that will start looking at how do we get our industries to start looking at the green corridors, industrial corridors, to be able to lower their carbon intensity of the products. So this says, Mr. Ajong, that we have a very bright future for the youth if we begin to start looking at the areas of the skill sets and the capacity of the youth of the continent. It says if we then begin to start preparing our industries and the partnership within various industries to start working towards this net zero ambition of 2050, we really have a very exciting future that can be able to create much more jobs than we could expect. So I'm very excited, I must say, that we are now at a point in time, if we prepare our youth and we prepare our economies well, and we embark on our just transition, because I think that's going to be quite critical, and we embark on our just transition that looks at how inclusive our transition and how fair our transition is to the net zero. Because if we don't do that, a lot of people are going to be left behind. But the rest of the world is very keen. In South Africa, we have international partnership. that has pledged about 8.5 billion US dollars to help South Africa's just transition towards net zero in 2050. So this is something that says, how then do we leverage on this capital that has been pledged, and also the pledge of 130 trillion by the financial actors at Glasgow? We need then as DFIs to start saying, how do we leverage and facilitate that capital by making sure that there are opportunities that talks to renewable energies, that talks to green hydrogen, that talks to the transition, because we might be even using a gray and blue hydrogen in the meantime. But as long as our just transition is very clear and unambiguous, we have a very good chance of attracting the requisite investments in the form of these pledge capitals.
We are going to get back to you later on on the panel with regards to what we consider to be a just transition. Now, Mr. Serge Kamuhinda, how do you foster economic growth while breaking free from hydrocarbon dependency?
Thank you for your question. Actually, when you look at it, at least for the transport sector, you may find that the fossil fuel dependency has not led necessarily to more growth. If you look at the motorization rate, meaning the number of cars per 1,000 inhabitants, in Africa, it is averaging 42 vehicles per 1,000 inhabitants. The world average is around 180. So there is actually, if you want, a limit to growth. You look at the availability of fuel in rural areas. You'll also look at how fuel is a big cost macroeconomically speaking, because it involves a lot of forex. It is all imported, whereas for electric mobility, for instance, the energy, meaning the electricity, is locally generated and in large parts of Africa also renewable. So I would say that a fossil-based source of energy, at least for the transport sector, has not led to more growth, and that there is a chance to now use the transition towards green technology also as a way to catch up in the value chain and for Africa to participate in the manufacturing value chain of electric mobility.
Dr. Silva, what are the roles of the developed and the developing countries in addressing net zero?
Well, I think we have 54 countries in Africa, and each country has its own idiosyncrasy. And I think when I speak, I can rightly speak for countries like the ones of my friend Rwanda, Serge, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Burundi, because we form a region called East Africa region. And then if you add South Sudan and Ethiopia, more or less there is some homogeneous thing there. But I must tell you that there are, we should be optimistic regarding the development or the taking up of renewable energy in Africa. I was a member of a project called Africa EU Energy Partnership for 9 years, beginning in 2004. Yeah, and what happens is that this we had an idea that by 2020, Europe was going to be 20% renewable. They have almost got there. In 2022, they are 19% renewable. But if you pick a country like Kenya, we have geothermal, we have hydro, we have wind, and we also have solar. Kenya today is more than 80% renewable energy, and the government is planning to be 100% renewable in 2025. That's just around the corner. So when I see this kind of development and a very young population, I see a lot of opportunity for Africa. and for renewable energy. So like if Europe wants to help us to even go faster into the green path, they can give us some green bonds. We are already doing research on the green hydrogen. So I can see a lot of hope there. And I am sure that Serge is in agreement with me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Constantino, may we know what concrete steps are being taken in your state of Ceará and Brazil as a whole towards achieving net zero?
Okay, Mr. Ajong. First of all, Ceará State holds a huge potential for renewable wind and solar energy. And this potential today dimensioned in the interactive atlas wind and solar is about 900 gigawatt of generation capacity between solar, wind on and offshore. Of course, is a huge potential. Not only Ceará State has this potential, I think that even Africa has a big potential. But here, the first step we're thinking about is to determine public policies related to green hydrogen production and all the use we can obtain from it, okay? So the first step the governor of the state made was create a green hydrogen multidisciplinary work group to develop and coordinate actions within the state for the implementation of public politics for renewable energy and the green hydrogen hub here in the state. This is the first step, okay? The second one is to contract a consultant service to design these public policies related to renewable energy. So we have joined with GIZ Deutsche Gesellschaft, that is the German Association for the Development, okay? So this entity for the German government agreed to work together in establish all these kinds of public policies that we need to develop to create confidence in all the investors that we are attracting to Ceará State. And I think that all the policies that we have today, we have policies, but we think that we need to aggregate another to guarantee that in the next future, we can use the green hydrogen, only green energy, substituting the fossil fuel, okay? So this is the second step that we are working on, okay? So I think that this way can give us the opportunity to develop and to implement this hydrogen hub here in Ceará State, because the natural conditions we have. Now we have only to organize the state to do that, okay? So, Mr. Ajong, I think that is all, okay?
All right, thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Dlamini, the DBSA in a recent statement said it's committed to playing an active role in a just transition that achieves net zero emissions by 2050. Can you shed some light on this? And what is it you consider to be a just transition?
Thank you very much, Ajong. Indeed, that is correct. We have committed ourselves to providing transition finance to projects that have a very clear and unambiguous plan towards the just transition. So the just transition for us is, I think the emphasis is very much in the word just, because just says it's got to be an equitable transition. It's got to be an inclusive transition. It's got to be a transition that does not leave anyone behind. It's got to be a transition that addresses the vulnerable communities. We know that when we have to actually to retire coal-fired power stations in South Africa, there's going to be a lot of municipalities and communities that will be vulnerable to being left destitute. So as a country and as a DFI, we are looking and working together with government to say, how do we make sure that our transition towards net zero takes into account the risk of these communities being found without jobs, being found without sources of income. So what we want to do is to make sure that we are able to come up with alternative industries and also the capacitation and capacity building programs that will make sure that these communities are able to have alternative jobs, because we have the beauty on the continent and many other parts of the world of a very long days of sunny skies. So solar energy or renewable energy in general, including wind energy, are a very real possibility. Already 10% of our power generation comes from renewable energy. And as such, we want to make sure that as we are embarking on this just transition, we look into alternative jobs for our communities. We take advantage of the possibilities of green hydrogen, which will be produced in country and create more jobs than actually currently is the case. Because when we are able to do that, we will be able to get into a future of net zero with our people having jobs and having dignity intact. That for us is very important, because that to us then says that would have been a just transition.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Serge Kamuhinda, what is Volkswagen currently doing, and how far is the company willing to go in working towards zero emissions by 2050?
Yes, thank you. So we in Rwanda have already a fleet of electric vehicles that we are using, and we have also partnered with Siemens to build electric charging stations. If you look at the overall vision of our company, there's a very clear commitment to transition towards electric mobility. And we think that this will also be the case in Africa, provided that we do the necessary groundwork to provide infrastructure, to have the right policies in place, and also to find the right cars for the African market that are, yes, electric, but also conducive to the sort of environment we are operating in. So what we are doing is the work together with the government of Rwanda that has in April initiated a series of incentives for electric mobility. So what we're doing really is to prepare ourselves towards that inevitable transition that will come. And in the meantime, we're also, of course, using cars that are less polluting because they are newer and they are more fuel efficient. And we are working on having cars that are made in Africa. Instead of seeing cars on the African streets that are imported, that are old, and that are very bad for the environment. Thank you.
Dr. Da Silva, how does Africa balance its development priorities with the global efforts to curb carbon emissions?
Okay, Ajong, this is a very interesting question. If you go back to the sector of telecommunications, you will find that it has some advantages to be behind. Because if you are behind, somebody ahead may make mistakes that you will not make because you have seen it. Now, Africa has invested very little in copper cables to put fixed lines. It began with zero telephones, fixed line, very few, but immediately has gone into mobile technology, which is much better. And today, Vodacom makes more money in Africa in the communications than in Europe. So it is very interesting also to consider that in this struggle to go green, when you see people doing things which are no longer good and suitable, like coal and oil, heavy fuel oil, etc. For us, we say now that we came to a moment in which the technology to produce a kilowatt hour using renewable energy, let it be hydrogen, let it be, say, geothermal or hydro or wind or solar or biomass, you realize that it is space to go a green economy. So I don't see any kind of fight between development and being green. We should go green. And what I think is a very important point that we should keep in mind is that we have to train people in Africa to be able to design things, to build things, and then as my good friend from Rwanda, Serge, mentioned, we don't import, we make, because the nations in Africa are trading nations, and we shouldn't be. We should be manufacturing nations. So in the university where I work, Strathmore University, we have started a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, totally aligned with the 17 SDGs, the 7 Sustainable Development Goals, mainly the number 7, because we have 600 million Africans without electricity today. Also, we got funds from the government of the UK to develop a master's called Sustainable Energy Transition. This master's is very good. We did it in partnership with 8 other universities in Africa, including University of Cape Town. And this master's will train people, not only engineers, but lawyers, IT people, and business people, so that they can face the challenge of the universal access to electricity. So I bet Africa is the continent of the future, because the technology is there, and we have a lot of young people who can work not only for the continent, but for the whole globe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Constantino, in what ways do you see potential collaboration between Brazil and Africa in working towards achieving net zero?
Mr. Ajong, one of the bases of our public policies is just the international cooperation. I think that would be a good action, not only a good idea, propose a formal collaboration, because I think that we both, Brazil and Africa, we have same conditions of natural resources and higher wind and solar generation potential. I think that we can collaborate in all the areas related to training of the people that will be needed in this project. I think that we can collaborate in the technology. We are now just developing a center here in the Federal University of Ceará to develop the green hydrogen technology, to train students, to form students, to prepare them for the next future. Not the next, the future is just now. I think that this collaboration will be possible will be very positive for both countries, both Africa continent and Brazil. So I think that we can work together in a term of cooperation between us. There is no problem, and I think that we can get advantages in this action, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Dlamini. The issues we're talking about, some of the problems that we're trying to resolve are not of Africa's making. And there are people who think that Africa should not be made to pay the price for problems created by other people. How important is it for the international community to support Africa in meeting engagements towards achieving net zero?
Thank you, Mr. Ajong. I think it is a fact that the G20 nations are responsible for more than 80% of the greenhouse gas emission. But at the same time, the G20, the developed world, have committed through the GCF, the Global, the Green Climate Fund, and GEF as well, the Global Environmental Facility, to work with the developing nations or developing economies to put together a very sound and credible transition towards a net zero emission. But what this says is for Africa to get onto the low carbon future, because remember, Africa as a whole, in terms of the total greenhouse gas emission generated globally, I think we are responsible for something almost like 2% or under 2%. And 1% of that, actually, 50% of that is from South Africa. So I don't think that it helps to say we are not responsible for greenhouse gas emission as the continent. Therefore, we want to continue to produce fossil fuel, because now the world says international markets will be imposing carbon tax on products that have got high carbon intensity. So now, as Africans, it is to our advantage to embrace this future, roll out renewable energy across our continent. We have been blessed by God, actually, with so much sun and wind, as my friend Dr. Da Silva earlier on said, and be able then to look at how do we start working towards this green hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. Because what this will do, we have about 640 million Africans that are without electricity. All of a sudden, if we really want to leverage on this pledge capital of 130 trillion by the financial actors globally, we can begin to put up renewable energy plants across each and every country on the continent. And the hydrogen fuel cells will act as a much more cheaper and sustainable storage for this to match it with the requisite demand, with the demand peaks. Because currently, the battery storage has proven to be quite expensive. But the hydrogen fuel cells is offering a very exciting future of all of a sudden solutioning for the storage of this renewable energy, which then can even then be able to be used in the heavy industries, the manufacturing, as well as even actually the steel manufacturing and big heavy users of electricity. So this to us says we have a much more exciting future. I know that countries that are currently producing and reliant on revenues from hydrocarbons are going to be quite taken aback, but there is a very viable alternative. It's going to be the function of how soon and how quickly do we prepare ourselves, the plan and design our future in such a way that we don't lose out on this embrace of the new reality, because the global business model are going to be turned on their heads. And therefore, as the continent of Africa, we really owe it to our people and to our youth to embrace this future that can create a much more alternative jobs than currently is the case. So it helps no one for us to argue and make the argument of who's responsible, because we are talking about the global commons, because the atmosphere is a global common. It does not matter where you are. If we do not look after our global commons, each and every citizen of the world, and be able to provide alternative to currently what is actually emitting, we will be failing ourselves and we will be failing our youth. So we owe it to ourselves to really make sure that we at scale create the requisite capacity in our youth and in our people, and make sure that we are able to really drive this exciting new future of low carbon as much as we possibly can. Because otherwise, we will miss out on our exports to international markets are going to take a heavy beating if we continue to produce fossil fuel and think that the international community is going to be forgiving. We can be able to create very viable alternatives. And it is up to us as the peoples of the continent to then engage the developed world, which actually has demonstrated willingness to work with us in our transition towards the net zero. It really, for me, I find it very beneficial for the continent to embrace this new future and embrace the production and the creation of renewable energies, which will be able to give more energy and be a great catalyst for the jobs in each and every country on the continent of Africa.
Mr. Serge Kamuhinda, based on your experience in Rwanda, what role do you think governments can play in creating the enabling environment or working in partnership with corporations like Volkswagen to make sure that we all work towards this common objective of zero emissions by 2050?
Well, I think governments are doing the right choices by announcing clear policy choices, targets. For example, Kenya, Rwanda, the city of Lagos, Ghana, are countries that have made clear commitments in Glasgow. And then for in the case of Rwanda, there has been already a policy for electric mobility. And the question then now is how the best thing to do moving forward, rather, is to talk with the private sector and see how green value chains can be established. It won't be easy. It won't be a walk in the park, and there's definitely a cost to it. But as my predecessor has said, Mr. Dlamini, is that it is also about inclusion into the global economy. Africa may say, no, it was not fair. We do not want this. We are not contributing towards pollution. But the world will simply not allow you to participate in the global economy. And you will also find that you have not been able to participate by manufacturing things, so that you are penalized twice. You can't export, you can't manufacture, and you are just then going to import green technology from abroad, and you'll just be sitting on your point that yes, you have not caused pollution, but the world is transitioning. And I believe also we need to look at it holistically. There are certain sectors such as transport, especially urban mobility, that are easy to decarbonize more or less. But there are other sectors such as heavy manufacturing that may not be easy to decarbonize as yet. And so what government can do then is to identify those low-hanging fruits, those opportunities that can materialize in the near future, and then find a way to address real concerns for the sectors that are very hard to decarbonize and that are still vital for the economy. What we see talking to government as a company, Volkswagen, is that there is willingness to manage that transition. and there is the lucidity that that transition is coming, and is coming in a very, I would say, challenging manner, because it's not just the green transition, the transition towards the green economy. It also the fourth industrial revolution and the transition towards more digitalization. And all this is not very easy to manage. And if you're not doing a proactive job as Africa, we risk really being not included in the global economy moving forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamuhinda. Time has really gone by so fast, and it looks like we're down to the last 10 minutes. So we will be proceeding with closing remarks. Now, Dr. Da Silva, from Glasgow, the next Global Forum on Climate has been announced for Cairo, Egypt. What does this mean for Africa, and any special expectations you will be having for the next forum in Egypt?
Yeah, definitely the whole planet is looking at Africa, because of COP27 is going to be in Cairo, in Egypt. And it is a very great opportunity for us in Africa to be able to further the agenda of the zero carbon emission. Our university actually has a project together with the United Nations. So you know that United Nations has Gigiri here, the center in Nairobi. We are working together to transform each and every campus of university into an academy to train people to go green, no matter whether this person is a lawyer, is an actuarial scientist, is an engineer, is a medical doctor. All of them have to have in mind that the path of sustainability is the path of green economy. So we will be helping them to know how to recycle, to reuse, how to be concerned about sustainability of environment, and we'll be teaching them inserted into the syllabus of their degrees, no matter which degrees is that. And then what is going to happen is that we are going to begin having power to do manufacturing, to improve our transport. And in the end, what is going to happen is that there will be a boom, an economic boom, because right now, the figure I mentioned, which is staggering, that 600 million people in Africa do not have access to electricity, is almost the whole population of Europe, 600 million. Now, today, the GDP of the 54 countries of Africa together is 2.6 trillion. Now, one country of the G7, France, has a GDP of 2.7 trillion, more than the whole continent of Africa. Why is it? Because we don't have the affordable and reliable and clean energy. So I think this is the time for us to go for it. There is a lot of commitment from Europe and America to help this continent to become come of age in terms of energy and serve everyone. I am optimistic about that.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Constantino, how optimistic are you about the future?
Thank you for the question. I'm really optimistic because I think that this new generation can face a challenge, but a good one, because to run, to get the green economy, to anticipate it, I can that this could create a mentality, a positive mentality, a green mentality that is necessary, And I think that even in my state, I can say that Ceará state is a little state, is a big state, not so rich, poor, but has a great potential. And I think that the youth people now see how Ceará state has a pressure. The curiosity that this project of the green hydrogen hub is causing here is fantastic because it's attracting the eyes of the youth in the state. So everybody here in the state, institutions, companies, government, etc., even the universities are engaged in this process. So I don't have any reason to think that this project won't be a success here. And I think that even in Brazil, Brazil is a green country based on his energy matrix is almost 7% renewable today. Ceará state is growing in this green generation because we are now 51%, okay? But in the next 2 or 3 years, we will be next to 7% here in the state. So I think that all the people of the country and even in our state here are optimistic with this future. And we now said that the future is now here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Mr. Dlamini, as we move towards the end of the panel discussion, South Africa is the economic powerhouse of the continent. What kind of leadership should we expect from your country in trying to move Africa towards attaining these goals?
I think South Africa has a very big role to play in partnership with the rest of the continent, especially as we are also moving into the Continental Free Trade Agreement. South Africa has the industrial capacity. But I think what this says is how will South Africa lead its just transition? And how will South Africa create this environment for its industries, especially the heavy users, to be able to move in that direction? And how then do we cross-pollinate with other sister countries across the continent? Because I think the continent will succeed if the continent is able to work together and share its expertise and share its knowledge, and so that we make it easy for the peoples of the continent to really take advantage of this bright future. Because I really do think that green hydrogen we will see a mass production of green hydrogen come 2030 for heavy industries. And it's going to be much more cheaper than the blue hydrogen at this point in time, much more cheaper than hydrocarbon prices. So it is something that South Africa can really be able to lead the way in a very responsible way and share with the rest of the continent how we are doing things and how we can be able to learn from each other. In as much as we think we can be able to do a lot, there is much more that you can also learn from our brothers and sisters from the rest of the continent.
Dlamini, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silva.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serge Kamuhinda.
Thank you.
Mr. Constantino, thank you very much. All right, Caroline, you can take over. Thank you.